Sony PlayStation is widely considered to be one of the best places to play games. In all honesty, as a lifetime PlayStation player myself, I have to admit that the PS5 generation has given very little reason to actually own the system over its competitors this time. There frankly just isn't really enough actual first-party exclusive titles that are available on the console. Most are just ported away anyways, and the absolute state of Sony's first-party offerings this generation around are the prime example of great gameplay meets just terrible story characters and, let's be real, performative activism. One of the crown jewels in Sony's cap, however, is Naughty Dog, the makers of Uncharted, The Last of Us, and soon to be Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet, which is the upcoming science fiction game from the studio head Neil Druckmann that is apparently mired in problems behind the scenes. But beyond this, I also want to speak on Sucker Punch with Ghost of Yotei, because there's a pattern that I'm noticing there too. And then placing this all against the rumor from a while ago that Sony is reaching their breaking point with their Western games divisions. Let's start with Naughty Dog. Like I said, they're doing Intergalactic. It's another female-led game from Naughty Dog, where the female character is deliberately made, let's be honest, unappealing to the male gaze, because Naughty Dog is that sort of studio now, I guess. Bloomberg, however, recently blew the lid on Naughty Dog's operations and exposed that despite claiming they would never crunch their staff ever again, they were in fact doing just that again. As seen here from Bloomberg, Naughty Dog has pushed mandatory overtime on the staff there to hit a project target for Intergalactic's demo, which is meant to be sent to Sony's higher-ups to prove that the game is going to deliver on its promises. This is normal practice in the industry, demos at least, I mean, especially in a first-party sense. But it is more dire than usual because the western side of Sony has been, well, not exactly hitting the sales targets that Sony is used to from these studios in the past. There's no point in denying that Sony's first-party IPs have gone from giving people what they wanted to becoming this weird, well, how do I put it? I guess a humiliation ritual is a really good way of doing it for every franchise to varying degrees. But the thing is that with Sony's first-party games, it's almost never the gameplay or the graphics or the actual performance of these games, as in FPS and whatever, that suffers. Sony's developers are, yeah, first class in all of these regards and departments. Even Yotei looks great. But it's the same problem that tends to plague all of Sony's games from a Western perspective for a long time now, which is, of course, the story, the characters, and overall writing. And there have been rumors growing that Sony is at their limit with these studios because the games being made are not meeting internal expectations. This rumor came in October 2025 from that Park Place, who spoke to their alleged source at Sony, that told them that both Ghost of Yotei and Intergalactic were both being viewed by Sony's higher-ups as last chances for these companies to prove that this new, I guess, female-led direction of these franchises was going to pay off or not. Park Place's source said this: "Another rumor I am also hearing is that Naughty Dog's Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet and Ghost of Yotei are the last chances for these Western developers. If they fail, after that, Sony is going full focus on Japanese developers and instead going back to traditional stories and characters. They're citing China winning on the gaming market, with Genshin Impact, Black Myth Wukong, and Wuthering Waves as a reason to change. This all but makes sense, considering that Eastern-led media is just destroying everything in terms of projections, player numbers, and then some. Games like Elden Ring, Wukong, Wuthering Waves, or the more recent Where Winds Meet, these are all games that have resonated with players, while also giving them massive games to just feast on content-wise, without the annoying, terrible writing that's often associated with westernized games. We're seeing that the games that ditch these political angles are also winning big at the Game Awards too. Look at Expedition 33, a game pretty much almost devoid of all diversity in its main cast, just completely sweeping the awards, even beating Naughty Dog's The Last of Us Part 2 in terms of how many it won. I do think it's safe to say that whether these people want to admit it or not, that people are sick of the female-centric, let's make everything progressive angle. I've been obviously pushing back against this for years because it is destroying everything, and I stand by that. The Last of Us Part 2 apparently did so well for Naughty Dog, they've actually released it almost as many times as there's been years since it was also released, which is usually only happening because the game did not recoup costs yet, leading to multiple editions of the same game to just entice people to buy it again and again instead. The response to Intergalactic has also been, mixed to say the least. I don't think the game looks bad, okay? I'm sure it's gonna look great, it's probably gonna play well, and run like Naughty Dog's other games do too, which is great. I have zero issues with Naughty Dog when it comes to, say, their gameplay or the graphic technical capabilities or their art departments. They are genuinely some of the best in the business when it comes to creating products that look and sound and feel as good as they can be. But it is, like always, the writing, like usual, that just ruins games like this. You can make the most beautiful looking thing ever, but if the main character is annoying and condescending and its plot is really preachy, which Intergalactic is about religion in 2025, so you can just go ahead and figure how that's gonna go, it's gonna be a hard sell for many. To say that Naughty Dog lost a lot of goodwill with Last of Us 2, that's an understatement with fans. They did flat out lie to players with their trailers, insinuating that, no guys, trust us, okay, Joel is totally playable for the entire game. See, he's even in the trailer. And then they, caved his head in and dumped him in a grave so Ellie and her girlfriend could just take the spotlight instead. The backlash was so biblical towards that game, even today people are talking about how much they hate the story and direction of Part 2 for good reason. And it all coincided with Naughty Dog's Neil Druckmann aligning himself with people like Anita Sarkeesian, the woman who was instrumental in pushing feminism in games for years, and the same woman who married herself recently because no man wanted to, which is crazy, but that's true by the way. So looking at Intergalactic, your pattern recognition goes off for a good reason. You have deliberately anti-male gazy main girl character, probably a diverse cast, tough women side characters like the one with the eye patch, and then Neil Druckmann's writing about religion of all things. I mean, what could go wrong, right? Well, except everything imaginable, of course. Again, I don't doubt it's going to be a fun game to play, and it's going to look amazing too, but it's the story that might just be a nuke on people when it comes to the game's messaging, which will just unravel and ruin everything. This is the same developer that allowed other religious symbols to be shot and destroyed in Last of Us Part 2, but if you wanted to point a gun or try to harm anything Jewish in the game, well, conveniently the game just halts you from damaging any symbols relating to that religion. Player choice, am I right? So this rumor of Sony being fed up with Naughty Dog and Sucker Punch and really all of their Western studios is not really a big surprise to me. The only thing that really shocks me about this is that it didn't happen sooner, because all their games with male heroes have been reverted pretty much, save for God of War, with either female heroes or new male heroes that of course also fit a new agenda for these developers, like with Miles Morales over Peter Parker. Of course, by now we all know that Ghost of Yotei did okay, for Sony at least. Not, incredible by any stretch, but it's recouped its cost apparently at least. But comparing it to Tsushima, it's still going to be a far cry up for performing as well. I never really said that Yotei would flop, as I said in my other videos about it, but I always contributed this to the fact that Sucker Punch kept their budget small on purpose, even though from what I've been told by people familiar with the game, the actual budget is far higher than what Sucker Punch is saying publicly, but they'll never admit that either way. But what we do know is that Brian Fleming has left Sucker Punch, which is wild considering he's been the studio head there for about 28 or like 30 years or so. And following the release of Yotei, Brian has confirmed that he will be leaving Sucker Punch in 2026. A lot of people wondered what this even meant. Was Yotei so good that he was walking away into the sunset? Or was he just being forced out? Currently, we don't really know, but it is, according to some, a surefire sign that the reality versus the fiction surrounding Ghost of Yotei, it's starting to crumble either way. As 80level.com reported here, they confirmed that Brian Fleming has left Sucker Punch of his own accord. He claims anyways that he wasn't forced out by anyone, which is still very suspicious either way. Because why would you leave a studio you founded with your co-founder Bruce Oberg well over 28 years ago, following the release of a game that has now been mired in controversy and speculation since? It's not like Brian was some random developer at Sucker Punch. The guy co-founded the whole studio. He's been there since forever. So what happened? There's really only two reasons why Brian would leave. The first being that he was given an offer somewhere else that was just too good to pass up on, which would have to be honestly one crazy offer to walk away from the studio head of the entire thing you founded in the first place to do something like that. Or the other reason being is that your game just did not meet internal expectations, and you were indeed forced to a degree to leave to change up the studio's culture and direction too. Here's exactly what Brian Fleming said via LinkedIn. Let me read it for you. So what do you think I should do next? That's the big question, because after 28 absolutely life-changing years at the helm of Sucker Punch, I've decided it's time to shake up the snow globe. I leave Sucker Punch in the capable hands of the strongest leadership team we've ever had. Adrian and Jason will do an amazing job as studio heads. And the rest of the directors, they are also capable and so ready for a new challenge that I have nothing but confidence the studio will continue to flourish. And me, I really don't know what's next. I'm going to stay at Sucker Punch through April 2026 to assist with the transition. Meanwhile, I'm trying to sort out which opportunities I want to explore next, and then he lists a bunch of stuff. So this confirms that Brian doesn't necessarily have a concrete backup plan upon leaving Sucker Punch. He does admit he has some opportunities here or there, which, I mean, let's be real, this is his public LinkedIn post. And most professionals in any space always make things sound better than they are because, well, you have to be positive. But again, this doesn't come off as weird to anyone else. The guy who founded the studio leaves after the game people either loved or hated and was full of controversy releases, and then he steps down like a month or two later and goes, I don't have any plans yet of what to do next. That's bizarre to me. Like if he just said, hey guys, I'm retiring, thanks for everything, that would be like a more convenient and nice way to maybe mask any problems, because Brian could just pack it all nicely and say, who cares what happened, I'm retired, like whatever, right? But he's not retiring. He doesn't even know what his next step is. As he said in his post, he's going to spend time with family, sure, and figure out what to do next, but there's no clear direction right now. So why would you leave behind a studio head position without something to land on first? It doesn't seem like it was done voluntarily to me, even though Brian says otherwise. Again, it just kind of reminds me of when like Corinne Bush left BioWare after Dragon Age Veilguard. And Corinne, as GameDeveloper.com reported back then, left BioWare saying as they left that BioWare was on the right footing apparently as Corinne left. But we know that wasn't the case, because shortly after Corinne left BioWare, there were mass layoffs. People in all departments got let go because Veilguard obviously did not meet sales expectations. But if you read only into Corinne's post, it sounded like everything was positive and amazing over there. So like I said, which is what professionals in any industry will say when they leave, because you can't leave without creating a, I don't know, I guess like a mist of confidence around everything, you know what I mean? At least when Carrie Patel left Obsidian after directing Avowed, they are apparently working at Netflix now on some new game. But it is weird how all three of these games that I just mentioned, Avowed, Veilguard, and Yote, they all have a similar controversy angle to them all with developers and such. And all three of these either directors or studio heads have left to some capacity. It never really bodes well. It always comes off as weird, honestly, and just leaves me suspicious. I think out of any of these departures, the Sucker Punch one, that feels the weirdest to me because the guy isn't just like some employee. Brian literally ran the show over there. Again, unless he got some offer that was better paying than being the literal head of a Sony first-party studio of all things, I'm just inclined to believe that this was not actually as voluntarily, I guess, as Brian claims it to be. You don't just leave the studio you founded that apparently did so well according to your own people, as all the damage control articles from the industry have said about Ghost of Yote. Doesn't add up. If your leadership led to an amazing release that reviewed well, sold millions upon millions, and broke all the records and was insanely profitable, you would instead be given more power, budget, and creative leeway. You wouldn't leave when you're on top, you know, unless you're retired. That's the only reason why. Again, I'm not going to claim that Brian is lying to everyone. I just find it very weird is all. Maybe we'll learn more in the eventual future, but for what it's worth right now, I'm just very skeptical of all of it. And it's weirdly timely that following that rumor in October 2025 about Sony claiming that Yote and Intergalactic are the Western devs' last chance before they pivot, that now one of those two games have officially released and gone, and the outcome was that the head of the studio just left suddenly after release. Like, that's definitely a bizarre turn of events, which gives more credence to me with that rumor that Sony is in fact wanting to pivot and is instead watching these Western game releases like literal hawks now. But circling back to The Last of Us and Intergalactic developer Naughty Dog, Bloomberg shared more on the situation over there, which looks like Naughty Dog is just returning to their old destructive ways of doing things, as it reads here. For the past 7 weeks, the Santa Monica-based studio behind The Last of Us has been pushing its staff to work long hours to get ready for an upcoming review of the demo by its parent company. According to people familiar with the situation, starting in late October, staff were asked to begin working a minimum of 8 extra hours a week and logging their overtime in an internal spreadsheet, said the people who asked not to be identified because they weren't authorized to speak publicly. This overtime period was an attempt to get the production back on track after several missed deadlines. That's interesting, right? Missed deadlines now. Like, so the game is in a bit of a development hell then, is it? Again, I'm not saying that. It's Bloomberg, so if you want to claim someone is lying here, talk to them, I guess, but still, it's interesting. Unfortunately, this shows that Naughty Dog is kind of just returning to their old ways. As further stated here, Naughty Dog has forbid their developers from exceeding 60 hours a week and working for now, but they've also been told to return to the office 5 days a week instead of the usual 3, which has led to, understandably, chaos for developers with children and such because their schedules get messed up obviously now. But what's more of a wild revelation is that despite Naughty Dog claiming they wouldn't crunch their developers more, they've also lost the people who were meant to enforce that new, I guess, policy too. As seen here, Bloomberg confirms that Naughty Dog hired producers to help with alleviating workplace crunch and overtime, but most of those people are already gone. They barely stayed around long enough to really really make any meaningful impact. We also have a projected release date as well. As you can see, Bloomberg claims the current release window for Intergalactic is mid-2027, but developers are still worried that Naughty Dog's management teams are starting to again ruin the goodwill they have with their own staff to meet these deadlines. Apparently, as of right now anyways, that crunch for the demo is being alleviated, returning devs back to 40-hour work weeks instead of the, 60. But the reasoning is still clear. Naughty Dog needs to deliver a playable demo to their Sony higher-ups. This is obviously important because if the demo isn't received well, not only could it just delay the game, if the demo is just terrible, this is how games get cancelled outright. Now, I doubt this will happen here considering it's Naughty Dog and Sony has likely invested millions of dollars already, but this is obviously still important. Wild that they finally have a demo, maybe possibly ready, and the game is a little bit over a year and a bit from release. It likely means the game is still in some version of development hell, but I don't want to claim to know anything about that myself, so I won't say that. I'm just theorizing here. Apparently, developers at Naughty Dog were also given coins as a present from the studio for their work on Intergalactic. One side had the paw print logo, but the other side had a quote from Intergalactic's plot, which reads as follows: "The suffering of generations must be endured to achieve our divine end." A fitting quote for a piece of memorabilia for staff, considering they're likely going to have to suffer themselves to reach the expectations of Neil Druckmann, who has officially now brought back crunch to his studio that he vowed he would never do that again. But I do believe one thing, which is that when Intergalactic comes out, it's going to be an SHIT storm of the highest caliber, as everyone's going to critique that game. And I can already guess that reviews will be glowing and players will be all over the place with their opinions. But this does beg the question of whether actual attractive characters do sell games or not to say Tati Gabriel, the main actor in Intergalactic, is ugly or anything, just that it's pretty obvious what Neil Druckmann is doing there with their character design, especially considering, as you can see here, that the whole Kim Kardashian thing at Fortnite is actually one of the most popular skins they've ever had in that game ever. And I mean, yeah, it's Kim Kardashian. Like I said, attractive characters sell. But Neil has infamously brought up how he believes that female characters need to be desexualized on purpose because he thinks it belittles them. Here's a clip where he infamously on stage spoke about The Last of Us before it was made and how Anita Sarkeesian influenced his way of doing things. The quality of the video is bad, I know, I apologize, but please watch this.
And the first project we started moving forward on was called Mankind. And the idea is very similar to what you've seen in The Last of Us, that the cordyceps has jumped from insects to people. And the people it infects, it can kind of create monsters or kill them. But the twist, the thing that was different about this idea was that it only infected women. And you found the one girl that it didn't infect, and that was Ellie. And you kind of protected her and tried to bring her to this lab where they were kind of finding a cure. And there were a lot of things that we were really excited about this idea, but ultimately it failed. And the reason it failed is because it was a misogynistic idea.
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
What are the things that she's going to be kind of really attracted to and attached to as she grows up? And as a game creator, I look around at kind of what we are making and what are going to be her role models from the stories, and I don't like what I see. More specifically, I'm talking about our female characters. And whether we want to admit it or not, these are role models. And yet we sexualize, we objectify, we marginalize, and we reduce these female characters to a lot less than they can be. And this is coming from a guy that almost made a really misogynistic game. So I kind of know what I'm talking about. So once this thing failed and I had this awakening, almost exactly at the same time, this Kickstarter happened about the tropes versus women in video games. And while you might argue with the way it delivers its message or whether every point is exact, you can't argue with just the pattern that you see in the industry. So I was really intrigued by this. The videos for video games hadn't come out yet, but I watched the rest of Anita's videos and I realized it's not just a problem in games, it's actually throughout entertainment.
As you saw, Neil used Quiet from Metal Gear Solid, Cortana from Halo, and Ayane from Ninja Gaiden as examples of bad female character designs. Hilariously though, all three of those characters are actually fan favorites and people love their designs and cosplay them too, which kind of tells me that Neil's view on female empowerment is being skewed by hateful feminists instead of actually helping him in his studio. Because objectively, having attractive women does sell your games, and it seems like these people that are whispering in Neil's ear are lying to him almost on purpose. There's nothing wrong with attractive women. But it's become deliberate that while everyone seems to have left the, I guess, Gamergate-esque 2014 way of looking at women behind to a degree, that Neil just refuses to get up and move. It's like he's headstrong that he has to prove a point here, when no point needs to be made in the first place. And with Sony apparently on thin ice with these sorts of ideas already, you then have to wonder, what will happen next? Look, I get it, okay? You don't want your intergalactic girl to have her chest bouncing like she's in Dead or Alive, but it's very clear based on the reception to that game's trailer that people are very kind of sick of this tired concept of we have to make them all anti-male gazy or whatever. And then you have to wonder if Yote did what it did and then the founder left, could the same then happen with Naughty Dog with Intergalactic? What if after that game comes out that Neil Druckmann also gets forced out? That would be crazy. But it is a reality that could end up happening, because whether Neil will admit this or not, these games need to make money. They can't continue to talk down to people anymore if you need to crunch your developers to meet what was said as multiple missed deadlines already. Things are going to break before long. I just wonder how much longer Sony's going to be willing to put up with this before long, but what do you think about all this? Thanks for watching, subscribe, see you when I see you, and oh yeah, Merry Christmas everybody. Have a wonderful day.